1999 had more until 2008, and it was like growing. From 2008 onwards, it is declining. So in 2008, let me think, 2016, these two crossed paths. So at the current state, the top 1% possesses more of all the shares of our planet than the bottom 99. This is all, inequality and distribution of wealth. And these costs of this system, of this not sustainable system, are quite a big amount of side effects. Obesity, teenage girls, crime rates, alcoholism, you name it, imprisonment, punishment. The more unequal a society is, the more bad side effects you would expect. In these statistics in this book, which is actually quite interesting, there was a fun fact that Greece, is, let's say, quite on an unequal state in comparison to many other countries, but obesity and smoking is in Greece above average. So it's like outreach, far above average. Anyway, there are really nice statistics, and it's like an interesting way of how to combine different statistics from a country. And all of that is based on one single fact, and this is people want more. But there is a solution for that. So in a circular economy, we can't anymore externalize all these bad effects. You will have the resources in some place, and then you will need to deal with it. And then you will usually have the environment, you have to follow the environmental standards of the country where you can find these resources. So you can't screw up anybody else anymore that easily. Let's say, and in circular economy, we in general distinguish between two different cycles. We have a biological cycle and we have a technical cycle. These are consumption products and these are service products. So everything we consume, soaps, shampoos, everything that is like consumed while being used should go into this should be fully in line with biodegradability and all these facts. And these can still have technical nutrients, but they need to be seen as nutrients. There's just substances that are being thrown in a dump at some point. So that's the basic story. Our story started in the year 2000 when Alchimia Nova was found by an eco-pioneer, by one of these activists from the older days, from the 80s. It was called Hans-Werner Mackwitz, and he was also like one of these first Greenpeace activists with a group of people, or one of these chemists that really wanted to have a saying. He was thrown out of Switzerland because of his activism against these big Ciba-Geige, these big chemical companies, and he tried to be like working actively against them. And so this was fully ecologically inspired activism that where he founded this company from. So it started off in that sense. I started working in Alchimia Nova in 2002, and at some point in 2008, I made a bicycle trip around the world. Actually, I wanted to go from Greece to Austria, but the other way around. So on this trip, I called this Eco Bike trip, and I had the opportunity to see ecologically threatened places around the world. And this was also why I had sponsors like KTM and like Adidas and and even export credit agencies gave me some money for this trip. And what I learned from this trip, where I saw these ecological endangered places, was that I don't want to focus anymore on the problems but on solutions. And I also found out that everything is possible if you want it. If you want to go to the other side of the world with your bike, you can do it. It's just in your mind. So, and we went on. We were like 3 at the time. The former head died in 2010. We rebranded it. We made a new story out of it. It was, and from that time onwards, it was starting to grow slowly in the beginning, and now more big. And just recently, 2019, we founded 2 more companies. One in Greece, Alchimia Nova Greece, where our CEO also sits here, and the Greek team. and then Archimenova research being just in line for common good. We work with three basic principles. We have circular solutions, we have nature-based solutions, and participatory solutions. So these are our pathways, and this is the impact that we can achieve. This is like a nice graphic we used to put in many of these proposals, and I think how we win these proposals with these nice graphics. Yeah, we work with plants, as I said, and we believe in plant powers. So either be the chemical constituents of these plants or be the technological abilities of these plants, we believe these can be a game changer. So we use them to extract metals, we use them to clean water, we use the chemicals in these plants to utilize them in any pharmaceutical products or food, or we even find out symbiosis between plants where some plant is used and can grow, for example, on the other plant, and so they have a nice small symbiosis going on, and we come to that in some more detail. We can explain the whole system, the whole ecosystem, with one single tree. One single tree gives us all the resources that we want to show in a functioning ecosystem. So a tree in spring would not try to be more efficient and to say, I would produce less blossoms because I need energy to produce them. They throw out whatever they have, and then they are fully pink or white or yellow, and they don't care if they don't get pollinated, all of them. Maybe 40%, maybe just 10% get pollinated and become fruits in the end. What is the objective of the tree? To get fruits. But they don't care because the waste are nutrients for the same tree. And this mindset is something that we want to take on to the other system. Then a tree has also several ecosystem functions that it provides. So while living and while being, it cleans the water, it cleans the air, and it provides shelter for other organisms, and there is like a super microflora happening, and it's like working by itself, and that's fascinating. So we see the tree as inspiration, and then if we now transfer it to our environment, we can define a building like a tree with all its ecosystem functions, with habitats. This is the tree scraper from Bill McDonough, who is a co-founder of this Cradle to Cradle community. We are, by the way, Cradle to Cradle partners. I don't know if you know Cradle to Cradle, but this is something we would work with a lot. And if you see a building like a tree, you can define a city like an ecosystem. And having this in mind, and working with this bio-inspiration, if you call it biomimicry or bio-utilization, is just bio-inspired in some way. There's a fascinating ecosystem that is currently being actually on the verge of dying out. I think 60% of all the coral reefs died already. It just cannot cope with climate change impacts. But anyway, these coral reefs, they have a set of different functions that makes them fascinating. So they take up CO2 from the water and use it as a building block for the same shell. So their buildings are made of CO2 from the seawater. At the same time, these coral reefs have two functions to get food. One is in a symbiosis with microalgae that lives inside the corals, and they do photosynthesis and provide the sugars to eat for these corals. And during night, when there's no sun or not even diffuse sunlight anymore, they would use the tentacles to grab whatever passes by, whatever it might be nutrients. So they would not go to the other side of the walls to collect the nutrients, they would capture them right away. And this can be an inspiration for a city planning. Actually, we developed this further in some proposals, and some of these, where we combine nature-based solutions with cities, are already running. And at the time we speak, some of the projects are presented in Ljubljana at the same time, in this circular city event. So I decided to come here rather to Ljubljana, and Simos as well. Another project where we work with whatever is left in the city is called Deep Purple. It's a biorefinery made from waste from our everyday life. It's like an end-of-pipe solution, but there's also like Apivita, so in case we make cosmetics from organic waste. One of these basic structures that is super important in our mindset is nutrient cycles. So we see that it's broken and we want to fix it. Nutrient cycles, we consume food, the food has consumed fertilizer that derives from Morocco, you know, and it's like a linear system if it ends up in the sea or if it ends up somewhere else, and we want to close this nutrient cycle again and return these nutrients to the soil. And this is the basic for most of our projects currently. So waste equals food. So we have a nice project running where our building will be one of the demonstrators. We have somewhere in Spain. In this project, we circulate the nutrients. The carbon that is inside these nutrients still left. We will do energy. We will have a biogas system. We will clean the wastewater in green facades, and we will reuse it for urban farming. And all this in just one building. We have some winter garden in like rainwater catchment and air treatment, and we develop these systems based on like capability of plants to clean water. And this is one of these systems that is also in Spain, a Finnish project that wastewater enters, or in this case it's grey water, or has been demonstrated, now we'll test it with wastewater. It enters, it runs through the system, it's beautiful, you can have your herbstone or mojito or whatsoever, it's next to a bar in Spain, so they would use that, and you can get clean water out in the end that you can reuse it in the same building. The same you can do in facade systems or in like indoor wooden systems. We have demonstrated that it works and it's beautiful, and you can also do farming at the same time. That these are these systems of air treatment and like air circulation in the building. Or in another project we have together with HYDROUSA as well is PV Adapt, which is building integrated photovoltaic system in combination with plants. So plants can cool down photovoltaics, and photovoltaics will be more efficient, will run more efficiently, and you can have a lot of modularity in these building blocks. You can choose if you want this or this system, and it's the same mechanism behind it. And so modularity is one of the important issues in circular economy. Or we work with like a pop-up environment, pop-up housing situation, which can also be used for migration. For example, if you have refugees coming at some point and you need quick housing that is super like circular, and you can clean the waters and you can provide additional functions with this building. This is researched in this project. Or this is something else that we put on. It's the first unisex public urinal that we put up in Vienna and potentially some other cities. It's also cleaning with plants. Or what we also did for the Austrian government, which can be a nice thing also in Greece, is the Bioplastic Roadmap 2050. So how can we actually make the shift possible to use only bio-derived plastics, as we assume that petrol at some point will diminish or will get more expensive, and then how can we make the shift? And we looked at the different technology levels of the systems. And this is like a think tank way of how things enter the system and how things can be reused, recycled, and what else is the virgin feedstock that needs to be renewable in the end. And we did the same, a slightly different project for chemical pathways for all like petrol-derived constituents. And now we work on the third of these projects in a row for these governments, which is called Austrian Biocycles. And this could be something super fascinating also for Greece, is how to use unused greens, unused biomass, and have a system of local pre-treatments with more central full treatment. Because you cannot like ship biomass around. The border for shipping biomass is like 50 kilometers, and then it's not feasible anymore. But if you do an extraction process before, you can ship it way farther. And this combination, we always return the nutrients from whatever is left back to the fields. In this way, we can achieve biocycles. That's the basic idea. And inspired by these, biocycling nutrients or cycling nutrients, is one of the most interesting project potentially for Greece, which is HYDROUSA. We will have a workshop afterwards for that. I will just give you a very brief insight because we'll have set dedicated things. We just use wastewater, clean it, have again biogas systems, and then have a very nice agroforestry system to utilize the wastewater directly as nutrient source and as irrigation source in an agroforestry setup. So agroforestry is meant to be a symbiosis between these plants again. So you can provide shade, you can provide shelter, you have beneficial organisms in the same space, and you can also have a production running there, and potentially higher production than conventional agriculture. So we have a conservation agriculture setting. We will also have bio-inspired dew or humidity collectors. So they work passively and can condense water from air. We can harvest rainwater, and we can even desalinate salt water with passive systems, just working with the sun. And this can be radical innovation. Yeah, we can apply this also to cities, and we can make use of several of the resources in cities. So we can even use waste and bioleach these to recover the minerals. You can, what is also quite interesting for Greece, because there is a geogenic, you will find nickel in the Pindos area, for example, or even in Mytilene, Lesbos area. There is high nickel content in the soil, and nickel can be harvested by plants and economically feasible. It's at like 14 euros per kilo price, and you plant these plants, let them grow, and let nature do the work, and you just harvest the plants and you recover bio ore in the end, and you can recover the nickel and sell it again in the market. This, I think, is something very promising for Greece as well. Yeah, so inspired by this tree, we can now have these as inspiration source and think about it in technical terms. What does it mean? It has 3 different levels, but we say nutrient cycle, and then we say how can be a technical product inspired by this system and run at the same level of way of thinking. Usually, we can split up the technical cycles in different categories. So the smaller the cycle, the lower energy intake it needs to recover these resources. So you have a service which is directly entering again the person. You don't need to go a step up. You have a refurbishment, you have a parts harvesting, and a deeper refurbishment, and you have a recycling. So recycling is what is actually propagated by the governments. It's actually the least favorable in a circular economy. We need to keep this in mind, because we think that recycling is super cool and we need to increase recycling rates. It's the least favorable. It's still better than nothing, the dumping, but it's not the best. Working in this mindset now, there's also a shift in thinking of different service or systems or business models. We define like 5 different systems where we can stick to, and something that is easily understandable is a product as a service. I will get into that very soon. The others are also quite well known, I suppose. For example, construction. Actually, a consumer, they don't need the materials. I mean, why would you need a window, the glass, for your house? Why would you need you're not interested in this. You can't eat this glass, you just want to look through something. You know, you don't need the materials actually, you need the function of it. And having this mindset and thinking of the function, this can create totally different approach of using and thinking how we use our materials. Suddenly, the materials have high quality because people that sell the service want to sell the service for a longer time. And you don't need to rebuy things, and they don't want to make you rebuy the things all the time. You know, this obsolescence, perceived and planned obsolescence, how it's called. You can have easy ways of construction and made for deconstructability. So you can have foundations that are deconstructable. You can save your materials in a building, and you have a material bank actually, and so per mouse click you would know how many kilograms of copper, for example, you could harvest in a building, or how many kilograms of aluminium or iron, just per mouse click once they are digitalized. Transportation is another big topic. We're actually not interested in to own a car. It's actually a burden for us to get it to the mechanic all the time and to fix it, and most of us have no idea of why is it now broken again. And so if we buy traveling or the kilometers instead of the car, this might also change attitude a lot. And the same is true for, you know, all sorts of transportation. Even products, washing machine. Who actually needs a washing machine? You want washing, right? At the end of the life cycle of a washing machine, it's super heavy. It ends up in the woods in the end because people don't know where to throw it, and it's a burden. But if you buy the washing instead of the washing machine, then you know it's a big steal. Tools, tool library. You don't want to own the tools. You don't want to own the drill. You want the hole in the wall. You don't want the drill. In reality, I mean, if you're a professional, maybe it's a different thing. And the same is true for clothing. Leasing jeans, for example. Or something more of my favorite examples is light as a service. You know, these light bulbs, there was this big debate that the light bulb needs to last only 1,000 hours and no more. Otherwise, it's not like working in this consumerism way. And so you can now Schiphol Airport, Amsterdam Airport, they don't own any more light. They just, no more light bulb. They just pay for the service of light. I think you understood. It's quite a different approach, but a new one, I suppose. Upcycling. I'm quite sure here at Impact Hub you know quite a lot of examples. Fire hoses. They need to throw them out every single years, like 3 years, and have to exchange all fire brigades all over Europe. And this is like a material that is actually very durable. And you could make all sorts of things. You don't need to crash them and burn them or bury them. There are many more options. And a very important issue in the whole supply chain is digitalization. So once we have the know-how of where our material is located and where you can find them, at what point of time you can actually have access to them easier. So they see it's a big opportunity. Together with the digitalization, something that is driven by the European Commission a lot is how to measure circularity. There have been 10 indicators formed, and Eurostat have already adopted them, and you can actually measure at different points where you follow up on circular. You can have your thresholds and your best cases, and this can be, you know, not a run to the bottom as it was now, but a run to the top. Who's better in circularizing the material flows? Yeah, this is not anymore, you know, it's not a ghost anymore. It is already written down, it's formed as objectives, and now we have very classic like goals that are really, they have numbers. And these need to be implemented by all European countries until 2025, and then the next level in 2030. So we need to recover municipal waste. 60% of municipal waste needs to be recovered. So there is a ban on landfilling. We can just landfill 10% of our waste anymore. So it's not about something that is like, we really need to act. And there are a lot of other things like incentives. There have been a very nice study by McKinsey and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and some others, Sun and the Commission, of what could be the impact of a circular economy. And they compared a linear economy, an improved linear economy, like getting better, but still following the linear model, and following a circular model. And they found out that you can actually have 1.8 trillion euros benefit if you follow the circular economy inside Europe. And you could create 580,000 jobs. So this is something very, it's there, it's a fact, it's not a fiction anymore. To finance circular economy, this is another issue. But they found out that they need an additional, like Ellen MacArthur Foundation, they need an additional 320 billion of euros to make a real shift in circular economy. And then we searched a little these different funds. So until so far, we found out the different, like there's a 2 billion fund, there's a 5 billion fund, there's a 7 billion fund that have already been attributed to circular economy. Different, cohesion policy, life funds, regional policies. And then we found the next level. This is a pot of 500 billion euros. It's not, it's violet. The violet is not on the circular economy. Blue is on the circular economy. Violet is like both. It's also circular economy, but generally boosting the economy, let's say. And but they wrote that it's dedicated. They want to push circular economy projects. You see all these different. This might be interesting. The Greek economic growth and jobs package is 35 billion euros for Greece for economic growth, and they like circular economy a lot, and there's a big potential. 35 billion. This is a number I think we might not even comprehend really well. There's nothing we would ever have in a lifetime, I suppose. Most of us probably, but it's. But I think it's if we tap into these, you can do a lot. We can actually reach a lot, I suppose. And there's also, which I recently found out, we don't have an Austrian circular economy roadmap, but in Greece there is one. It's not that well written, but it's still, for a ministry, it's well enough. It's really like the Ministry of Energy and Environment wrote it. And it's they have these 5 basic principles to follow. So they want to implement the waste hierarchy, they want to do more industrial symbiosis, circular consumption, and multi-stakeholder partnerships, and the monitoring progress. So things that I have touched upon, and this in Greece. So Greece is on its way. Greece is always good with philosophers and talking, but it could be a very good opportunity to get into that. And for closing, I want to give you one impression that circular economy is it's all about keeping the value. It's about you generate value, and then at some point in old systems, the value of a plastic bag or the value of whatever it might be is destroyed just by dumping it, by crushing it, by burning it. It's destroyed and it's not, harvest this value. When it's at the top, that's the point where it's sold. You process it, you mine it, you process it, you sell it, and then at some point it's lost. In a circular economy, you try to maintain this value and retain it. So, as I said, the lowest is recycling, but that's another graph of the same system, actually. Having tapped into this value generation, it's always, talking about all these different things, it's always about the system and the system needs in mind. What does a system need? I'm quite sure many of you know about design thinking, and the systems thinking is the same, more or less, but thinking in a system relation. What does a system need? How can we solve challenges, and how can we actually work in a system that it works? And I also heard quite recently ecosystems thinking, and this is actually what is super interesting. And closing with, I wanted to give you these pictures. We've seen the Martians. In this case, it was very feasible because he had the need to eat the poo, and there it was well accepted. And I think this is something we can start thinking about, and maybe we can discuss it afterwards. How would you feel, like theoretically at least, eating your poo? And that leads me to this love story. So I think it's love for the planet, if you want so. I think it's love for ourselves. So why should whatever comes out of our body should be worse, and why should we not, love us and have these, loving everything from us. Let's put it that way. And I think that it's an intrinsic motivation. Love versus fear. Fear usually is something extrinsic that comes upon us, and we fear it, and we need to react in fear. Love proacts, and that's also very beautiful with activism. And I think it's an important thing that we need to integrate this more and more to reach the citizens. We are well aware of most of these things, but like the other millions out there don't know yet what does it mean. So in reality, loving things leads us to being well with us, and leads us to something that we want is, instead of more, we want better systems, better schools, better education, and being better in line with us. And we want this social transformation that goes hand in hand with all these different business models, this approach, this disruptive approaches. And before I now finally finish, I wanted to invite you to submit for, as we talk about social transformation, there's a social innovation challenge where I happen to be a judge or on a panel of judges. You can win 50,000 euros for innovative ideas how to tackle the plastic waste problem through social innovation. And I think that's the right place to name it in the social entrepreneur scene. It's the deadline application is 4th of April, so quite soon, but I think it's not very big, the workload, and 50,000 is not bad. And if you talk to me, maybe, and then there is the last series of events that we started now in Austria. We might get them to Greece as well, which we call a Stand-Up Innovation Series. And we'll have next week, whoever is in Vienna, next week, maybe some, we start Circular Economy at Home, one a series, the next one will be about materials in June, and so on. And this will be fun. We will have back workshop, and we have green cocktails in the end. So, part of our team, and I really thank you for listening all the time.